Welcome to the Zero Trust Journey podcast, created by cybersecurity practitioners for those walking the same path. We share real stories, hard lessons, and hard-won victories from the field, so you can sidestep the pitfalls and deliver the wins. Grab your coffee, tune out the buzzwords, and let's get into the real story right here on the Zero Trust Journey podcast.
Today on Zero Trust Journey, we've got Norman Wong, Regional Sales Manager at Palo Alto Networks, seasoned cybersecurity advisor, and a contributor to NIST's NCCoE Zero Trust project. Norman, I want to talk more about that today as well. Norman spent over 20 years helping agencies and enterprises move from concept to real-world deployments. Norman, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Victor. Pleasure to be here.
Norman, I'm going to jump right into it. Zero Trust has been around for over 15-ish years, but adoption is still uneven, I would say. I saw something from Gartner. They predict that by 2026, only about 10% of the large enterprises will have mature and measurable Zero Trust program. That's up just about 1%, what was a few years ago. So still a tiny fraction. Why do you think it's taken so long for government and enterprises to move from theory of zero trust into operational reality, if you will?
Well, that's a good question there, Victor. I think there is multiple facets that's kind of hindering what we're journeying to, right? One of the facets is, educational enablement, meaning that they don't know what they don't know. A lot of them are still stuck in the 20-year ago past protection level, the castle and moat situation, and it's hindered them from moving forward because as they continue to move into the new era, as we're moving into AI and stuff like that, they're still stuck back in the 20 years. A lot of times they go by the concept of what is ain't broken, don't fix it.
I heard that a lot.
And so that's a common theme when I talk to a lot of my customers as well. And that becomes a do nothing situation and wait for all the compliance and the zero trust framework and all to come into fruition before they formulate a plan or strategy around that. So that is the major hindrance a lot of times. And then you also have the other facet, which is the human capital that has not usually been talked about, is you have people who are siloed into their own roles and responsibilities. A lot of those situations allow them only to do what is within their scope, right? They're kind of blindsided by what else is around them to embrace the entire portfolio of the zero trust. That becomes a secondary issue of hindrance because now there's no collaboration, right? Therefore, there's too much silos in the roles and responsibilities, not just technology alone. And that does not help with moving when even there's a framework, zero trust framework put in place. It makes it very difficult for them to restructure the organization to fit that mold. So that's two parts. Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the first part is more education/enforcement, like nobody's enforcing zero trust, if you will. People are still waiting for, okay, someone needs to tell me that I need zero trust strategy. And second is where it's still siloed. And I think zero trust/any IT security initiative is just talked about within the circles of zero trust or the security circles. It hasn't gone to business value. It hasn't actually broken down the walls of the security or IT, if you will, and reached out to business owners or reached out to the counterparts, if you will. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And the third piece is we're going to wait and see what everybody else is going to do. So you have that latter stage of things where you have everybody else waiting for somebody else to jump in first. So it becomes a very difficult proving point when you have a framework that no one wants to step in to be the first person, right?
Totally.
I don't want the first guinea pig in that persona. So that becomes a third portion of that, right? Do nothing. What I find to be very interesting is now you have to help the government to lay down the foundation of what zero trust is. And secondly, how do you actually make it operationalized? That is a very difficult thing.
Totally. Yeah. I do want to double click on your contribution on NCCoE, the paper or the document you put out there. So let's talk about that. So NIST NCCoE has played a big part in bridging that gap where we talk about like, how do I do zero trust? So they didn't just write the guidance. They ran about 19 different zero trust implementation, what I understood and read from the document, with 24 industry collaborators, including Palo Alto Networks. That's a lot of real world testing. It's not anymore like a theory or a white paper. From your vantage point, Norman, as a contributor, what did these pilots teach us about turning zero trust principles into practice?
To tell you the beginning of that story is it got me very interested. And that special publication that the NCCoE from NIST have done is the SP 1835. Right? It is the Zero Trust Architecture Implementation Guide, not just a Zero Trust paper, right? Or special publication 800, which defines what Zero Trust is. This is how you actually implement Zero Trust. So this is where the rubber meets the road. So it got me very excited to help out in this situation. And I got involved very early on and start to see what are the needs, where are the gaps to do zero trust? How can we actually help on this situation and provide real world scenario to customers around the world to implement zero trust? We're not just talking about theory here.
How do we do it? How do we actually do it?
Absolutely. So I got very excited about this particular project. So I jumped head first in, brought in a bunch of Palo Alto PMs. We had the director of policy involved. We had professional services. We had technical marketing engineers involved. The whole team came together and brought in what I believe is the most comprehensive zero trust play or solution that maps almost, I would say, 80 plus to 90% of the zero trust, because Palo Alto does not have a identity back when we were doing it 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago. So that was kind of missing link to the entire portfolio. But I was very, very proud that we actually pulled all the resources together and showcase where Palo Alto was, able to provide a zero trust solution, not just a zero trust software or a zero trust device that meet one portion of the zero trust framework. We're bringing entirety of that. That was a very cool project to be part of. And to tell you a very inside story about that is we actually was sitting in a round table with many, many other vendors in there, right? The vendor community together.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because when I see the names, some of that are also competitors. Like when in the market, you're competing with each other, but on this project, you're collaborating together. So yeah, share some inside stories with us. Tell our audience, how was that experience look like?
Absolutely. That's a little bit of, inside baseball there, right? We were talking to Zscaler and how to help them implement across the board with firewalls and IoT and everything else. We're talking about provide the IDP and so forth. We have across the collaboration with like even Cisco, how to enforce access control for some of their stuff. So we were fortunate to be selected to be the firewall vendor of choice to help them do all the access control, because they saw that the market share that Palo Alto has already made a great fit. And we went in from there and helped them start divvying up VLAN segmentation, do segmentation from a network perspective, provide visibility back to them, giving them data analytics from the XDR perspective. So we have a lot of visibility into their NIST NCCoE lab environment, reflected on what our implementation was. So that was very interesting. And they also asked something, right? Even with many IDPs in there, vendors in play, they asked a very, very cool question, which is like, how do we, bring in the race condition, right? Like we got federated identity across all this. Which vendor can actually help us identify all this different pieces of IDPs and then say which one is more authoritative going from the top to the bottom level, right? Nobody except for Palo Alto, like for us to jump in and say, yeah, we have a cloud identity engine that is free and you can use it to ingest from multiple IDPs and get those information back, right? And then you disseminate it as authoritative from there,
Totally.
which just blew everybody's mind. So that was pretty cool.
And I'm sure there are a lot more stories, and we'll leave it for the drinks, and we'll encourage our audience. If you want to get the inside scoop, reach out to Norman on LinkedIn or something and get those stories. So, Norman, you brought up identity a couple of times. I want to double click on that one. So, in the NCCoE project that you contributed, there's a grouping that at least I noticed as I read through the document, zero trust deployments into 3 models: identity governance, microsegmentation, and software defined perimeter. We covered that a little bit in the CSA Cloud Security Alliance, CCSK, and CCZT certification as well. And there's also an acknowledgement of SASE as an emerging approach, considering that studies show 83% of engineers bypass, you're looking at one of them, bypass security tools just to get work done. Which of these approaches is the hardest for organizations to actually implement without breaking usability? Identity governance, microsegmentation, and or software-defined perimeter?
I think, the NCCoE laid out the crawl, walk, run for a particular reason, because any organization taking upon this framework or architecture needs to have the crawl, walk, run phases.
Yes.
Depending on where maturity is, you need to pick one of those lanes and say, this is where we are, and take it from that vantage point view and go from there and build it out from there. So there's no saying that, one is easier than the other. It's just depending on where you are in your maturity. Interesting, IDP was like, one of the early ones, because they want to say, we want to know who they are. And then we do segmentation. Then that's where I think Palo Alto was the strongest, because we were default going in because they saw the value that were brought in. We were safeguarding the environment in the first place. And then the third piece is, funny story, Zscaler was in this program way before Palo Alto was. And because they were early in the particular program, they were able to influence saying that SDP, software defined perimeter, was kind of like what it should be for SASE, right? Before
Sure.
SASE was introduced as a term, SDP was there before. It's very interesting to see where, once we came in and we're redefining a lot of those bypass perimeters because of things that are proxy based and cannot actually tunnel a lot of the non-proxy traffic. SASE now became a forefront of discussion without SDP out, become a SASE solution that now complements with everything that has been done in the past, and now bridging that into the future. And that's how it should be.
Yeah, you know what? You emphasize the crawl, walk, run approach in this document, NCCoE Special Publication 1835, that you contributed, Norman. Even they outlines phase builds, so organizations don't have to rip and replace everything overnight, because that's one of the worries that when we talk about zero trust strategy, everybody's like, if you are an enterprise, have those monolithic applications that your business rely upon, you might think that if I go this way, this innovative strategy, I may have to rip and replace, and that's not a comfortable conversation with the business owners and the process owners. Can you share a specific example where this incremental approach helped an agency or an enterprise that you talk to or know of actually succeed instead of stalling in the planning phase?
Yeah, so that's a very good question right there, right? So there are many agencies that are taking it by phases, meaning that they will start off with, I've helped a few, with their perimeter firewalls, and then they move into the data centers. And then they mature enough to go and say, hey, you know what? We have now all the CDSS, which is all the cloud delivered security services on the perimeter and a data center. What else should we be looking at, right? And then they start to look at looking at the application layer, application security stuff. How do we implement CSPM and CWPP and things like that to create as they migrate into the cloud environments? And we're talking multiple clouds too.
Sure.
Having that kind of discussion and slowly peeling the onion of, zero trust architecture, so to speak, into the environment was very, very crucial. And then from there, we're bringing, more holistically, how do you stitch those cloud and on-prem together with like SD-WAN and SASE came into play and so forth. So that was a
All
very,
walk around.
and to give you an example, which I did in the past, very interesting. I brought a federal agencies that went full with the Palo Alto platformization, meaning they believe in Palo Alto's zero trust architecture, which I shared with, my journey with that particular customer, federal customer. They believe and they have actually in the implementation and deployment phases of multi-stages of the entire zero trust architecture with Palo
Nice.
Alto.
And normally it was not a rip and replace, again, for our audience, just to highlight that this is where gradually you adopt the strategy, you start weaving into your DNA of the security and business at scale.
Yeah. And that's the key component, right? You want to have the minimal disruption as you gain more maturity into the zero trust architecture. And then I'll throw one in there for you is, once you have kind of a phase of zero trust architecture, then you are talking more of a, how do I mature that with a ZTMM, right? Zero trust maturity model.
Yes.
CISA, right? So what are the phases that you're going to gain once you modernize some parts of that and you continue to, modernize more and more into the maturity model of that, zero trust maturity model, ZTMM. So yeah, you start out with your kind of original plan, right? Your traditional plan, and you move into, a development in the initial phases, and then you eventually want to get into the optimized phase where you have a very true zero trust architecture that is
Totally
to your environment.
Yeah. Norman, as I read through the document, and one of the biggest issues that at least I noticed NCCoE project highlighted was interoperability. And we talked about that a little bit. We know from Palo Alto's Unit 42 research that a lot of the incidents now span more than 4 or 5 attack surfaces, meaning if your tools don't talk to each other, you're in trouble. Like
Yes.
that context is missing. So how do you help customers avoid creating multiple zero trust silos and that don't integrate? So customer might start zero trust journey and they start actually aligning their solutions, their tools, if you will, to zero trust. But if they don't talk to each other, there's no integration, then you're just creating zero trust silos. So how do you avoid that?
That is $1 million question right there, right? A lot of the customers are actually in that same boat, right? Because they have fragmented IT departments and engineering departments and security departments and so forth. They all contend for the same level of visibility, but they're doing it differently. So the one of the few questions that I always ask my customers, I approach them as, what are you trying to get out of this at the end of the day?
Sure. What's the why? Let's answer the why. Yeah.
What is why? What is your why of doing this?
Right.
I am glad that you're actually looking at Palo Alto, but why are you looking at Palo Alto?
Right. Why are you looking to begin with?
Yes. Why are you looking to modernize? What is the ultimate outcome you're trying to get to? So I usually paint them that picture. If you have siloed tools, which is fragmented everywhere, it is going to be difficult for any organization. I do not care how much money you have, right? You will never get to that true zero trust visibility, right? Because you're going to have fragments of this, that, and the other. And it's like taking different glasses and looking at things in different environments. And then you have to compile them all together, which does not work as most cases pointed out, right? So what happens is I always point to like the casinos of the world, Caesar's Palace, for example. They have money. They have the most sophisticated cybersecurity tool sets in the world, but yet they get compromised. Why, right? Do you have more money in cybersecurity than Caesar's Palace? Probably not, right? So why did they still get compromised? I think it's because they have the fragmentation approach of doing security tools. When they do not have something that talks together or have an ecosystem. So I was telling them that ecosystem is crucial for any kind of visibility. And secondly, you want your people to be talking together, not at each other, right? So you have to have the tool that has a collaboration across all your people And without that, the attacker who is using AI today is going to be in and out of your environment in no time, right?
Totally.
And
Totally.
until 2 weeks later, right? And then investigation starts. So that's usually how I approach situations like this with, potential customers.
Yeah. So integration that's needed to actually stitch the context together. And instead of looking at 30 different screens, you'll be looking at one screen, but which has all the context that you need, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tool that brings people together. And that is part of the ecosystem that you built, right? Even though if you slowly build the pieces, it will be part of the ecosystem.
We can't have a podcast and not mention AI. So you wrote an article, I think I read it on Carasoft. Your article, Norman, highlights AI as a key ingredient, not just for threat detection, but also for things like policy creation and continuous verification. That's powerful. But it also raises eyebrows from our practitioners. How far are we today from true AI assisted zero trust? Like if I have a strategy, how much AI can assist or accelerate that journey for me? And what are the limits you're seeing in real deployments?
Well, that's a fantastic question right there. I think, we're all using some level of AI today, right? Let's
Yes.
not cells. It's forefront anything. And even my kids in high school are using AI. That's going to be the future. The piece is, how are we going to use AI to assist and better what we're doing today? That's more of the key point right here.
Mhm.
AI is not baked into most of your security tools today. It's going to be difficult for you to fight against AI kind of attacks and tools as they are coming in faster and more precise and relentless. So the way I look at this is there's two components to that. First, AI is going to be assisting with what we do on a day-to-day basis for our jobs. Second thing is it will be kind of the core tool that is going to be defending against majority attack, because there's no way for us to be human in the loop that's going to be doing blocking nonstop attacks that is coming in and with different variables of payloads and so forth, fast enough for our eyeballs to even scroll through those logs to even find that today.
And it's not even fair in my opinion, because at that point you have a human or humans against machines.
Correct, right? So I like one of those things that in the past before Nir Zuk retired, he always tell this in front of everyone on all hands. It's like going into a bar, right, with a knife, expecting a gunfight, right? You cannot.
You're not gonna win.
You're not gonna win, right? A knife is never gonna win a gunfight, right? Be prepared, use AI appropriately so that you can defend yourself against another AI.
Norman, when we talk about zero trust at this show, a lot of times we get feedback that it's just so much. So for leaders listening who feel overwhelmed, where do they start? It's the most frequently asked question, that because identity is the pillar, should we just do identity and that's a good start of zero trust? Do we do microsegmentation? Is that a good start for zero trust? Do we do continuous verification? So what's your opinion? I have my opinions about it. What's your opinion, Norman, when it comes to, would you agree identity is still the first building block of zero trust?
I think identity is crucial, not necessarily the first building block. I think identity set the stage for visibility. Why identity, right? Now, let's blow that scope up a little bit. When we're talking about AI, and we just talked about AI, the AI component now has machine identities, but not a user identity.
That's, APIs, SSH keys. Yeah, totally.
All out. So when we're talking about identity, we're not talking about user anymore. We're talking more of a machine or any kind of identity that can identify the device or the person behind it and what its purpose is, so that we can provide or grant correct access to it, and provide the threat level that it would actually pose in our environment or in our data. Forget about our environment, into our data.
Totally.
So how we approach that is crucial because we don't have any kind of visibility, that we don't know what or who is running amok in our environment, right? And touching our data and exfiltrating our data and, having the right appropriate access to begin with. And is it overextending its privilege by using super user or something like that, or root user or something like that, that now causes more exposure of a risk to our environment than ever before? Those are the kind of things that I think should be a forefront discussion, but not necessarily end all be all, right? Where I know in the past 10 years, identity has been put out as the end all be all. You have to have identity, and then that will resolve all your problems. That's not true.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
It has to be the entire framework for it to happen in order for you to have a true zero trust architecture. That's why the NCCoE from NIST is super crucial at what they're doing.
Yeah. And on this podcast, we covered a little bit. If you had $100 and that's all you have, and you need to start your zero trust strategy, do you put 100 for identity? Do you put 100 for microsegmentation? And I think we came to the conclusion after talking to so many people and the practitioners who have started their journey that it's not about putting $100 to just one pillar. It's about finding out where you're weakest and where the most exposure is and where it can get the most impact. That's where you put, let's say, $60 for identity. Maybe that's the weakest spot you have. Maybe you put 60 for microsegmentation because you just have flat network. Maybe you put 60 for continuous verification because you just don't have central logging systems. It all depends on your security, maturity, your business objectives, your risks, your exposures, where you want to split that $100, but it's not 100 for one pillar. Then you're definitely going into the knife versus gunfight.
Absolutely. And I think you approached it very well too. Assess your own, because every organization is going to be
Exactly.
unique. No such thing as a blueprint that here you go, off to the races you go, right? And spend your $100 there, right? So you have to assess your environment and see where you're going to be most impactful in reducing your risk in the cybersecurity realm of things, right? Where is the lowest hanging fruit that you can immediately remove those type of risk, and then you work yourself into a more maturity model.
Yeah. I'll share something funny story here. Once we have this conversation on the podcast, one of my friends, he works for a large entertainment company. He's a principal architect. He called me. He's like, Victor, what if $100 is not enough to cover anything? Like literally, the $100 is not enough. And I was like, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of times in security, we don't have enough budget to actually complete neither 1, 2, 3, none of it. It's just not enough. Then what do you do? So again, I went out, talked to a bunch of people, did some research, and we came up with the conclusion that we don't have to fix everything from the day one. We don't have to start as 100%. You just have to put the mindset that we need to have a priority, the stages, the maturity we talk about, crawl, run, and crawl, walk, run. And then you start allocating that budget. So if you have $100 that cannot give you anything 100%, you don't have to. Start with identity 60%, but maybe that's a stage one. You start getting some federated identity. Maybe you have some analytics added to it. Maybe the stage 2 implies that you're going to enhance that identity and get into the old applications. Whatever that means is, well, at least now you know my priority is identity, microsegmentation, continuous verification, and then you allocate budget accordingly with the tiers. Like the next time you get 100, this is what I'm going to do. The next time I get 100, this is what I'm going to do. Hence the zero trust journey.
Yes. I couldn't say it even better than that. One thing I would add to that is when organizations get breached, they come up with the funding.
A lot of money.
Yes. So I always preach the reverse, meaning that, you know what, $100 may not be enough, but you have to start somewhere, have a plan. Once the funding comes, you have the plan in ready to roll, right?
Yeah.
Plan for what are the phases you want. And then once you have it, because you already did your risk assessment, you have the phases of what it will look like, And you can have different vendors come and help you vet it out too. So use free resources, right? Most vendors would more than happy help you map those back to your zero trust architecture. And you just have to talk to them and say, hey, how can I do this? And leverage their expertise, right? That's what I would do, right? And expertise, people who already done it, people who have already done the NCCoE pieces, utilize that, right? There's a free resources for you to bring and mature your zero trust architecture. If that's something you put together and you may not feel comfortable that is the thing that is laid out for you and that's the customized journey that you want, talk to the vendors and talk to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? See what they come up with differently. Consolidate those.
There's a time cost to it as well, Norman. And you and I both have been on the customer side. We realize that your advice is spot on. Use the partners that have been with you throughout the journey, not the vendors, because they're going to try to push the product on you. Use the partners who are strong in the space, who can educate you, help you, instead of just coming up with the slides and saying that, hey, here's a PO that now I gave you zero trust education. You got to sign the PO.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Love it.
Yeah.
I think a great way to approach situations where you may not know where to start.
Yeah. Norman, you have worked with both federal agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Zero trust assumes your network is already compromised. That's one thing we always talk about. If you want to start with the strategy, that's a mindset. Print it on your wall, make mugs, t-shirts, whatever you want to call it. But that's also a cultural mindset shift, more than a technical problem. Where do you see the biggest cultural resistance, government or private sector? Any stories, anything, insights you want to share with our audience?
Yes, absolutely. Right. I think the human capital is like the biggest thing that needs to have a redefined roles and responsibilities as we move towards the modernization part of this, right? It cannot be just the technology and the processes. It needs to have the human people that goes with it.
Yeah. PPT, people, process, technology.
What I found in the past is there's always contention between the different roles and responsibilities, who gains access to specific tools. And they are kind of married to their tools in many ways. They're like, hey, I've used this 20 years. I love this tool. I don't
I'm
want
comfortable.
Yes. So it becomes a very difficult situation to talk about. So AI is ushering this new thought process of how to redefine our roles and responsibilities. It's kind of forcing hand in a good way. I think that, with the new usher of AI era, people are rethinking what they can and cannot do because they don't left behind. I think that is a opportunity that we should take full opportunity advantage of to ensure that we retool or reset expectation for the different roles and responsibilities, especially when the era is moving as a paradigm shift. So I think that is a great opportunity. It's not all doom and gloom. People just have to be ready for it.
Man, let's wrap with this one. You have seen agencies, enterprise, as I said, stumble along this zero trust journey. What's the biggest trap you have seen? The one mistake you wish organizations would stop making when they claim they are doing zero trust?
Yes, I think has to be
There's one too many. There's one too many to highlight.
Too many to put on this podcast here. Let me put it back to the second point that you pointed out, the fragmentation of siloed zero trust approach. I think that is the biggest issue of any agencies out there because they want to appease to many, many constituents within the organization. What happens is they have this, I want an endpoint zero trust tool. I want a SIM zero trust tool. I want a network zero trust tool, but they all don't talk together, right? I want a C version of that as well, but they all don't talk together. So at the end of the day, they're like, hey, I meet all the checkbox of zero trust because I have this layer, this layer, this layer, and all the 7 pillars of zero trust. Therefore, I'm 100%.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's spot on. Like the zero trust, first of all, is not technical strategy to begin with. It's an enterprise. It's your business strategy, and breaking those silos is the only way that you can mature that journey. Otherwise, it's just a yet another silo tool with the sticker of "We do zero trust."
Absolutely. You cannot break away from that. Therefore, I emphasize on the ecosystem of things, because the ecosystem is supposed to take most of those heavy lifting in the background and stitch it so that interop is there by default. You don't have interop, you have no visibility across your entire spectrum. And therefore, no visibility into your zero trust. I always go back to my customers on this. You cannot protect what you cannot see.
100%. Norman, thank you for taking us from concept to implementation of Zero Trust. Your NCCoE contributions and real-world lessons, I think, make this conversation incredibly practical. So once again, thank you.
No, thank you for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to us today. If you want to get the past and upcoming events and the podcast, go to ztjourney.com. And Norman, how do people reach out to you if they have questions, they want to connect with you? Is LinkedIn the best way, or anything else you want to share?
Yeah, LinkedIn is one of the best ways to communicate with me. If they want to, they can also reach out to me by my email, just like my name, norman.wong@paloaltonetworks.com.
Excellent, Norman. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the listeners out there. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That's a wrap on this Zero Trust journey. Now it's your turn. Step into the spotlight, share your story, and be part of the journey. Subscribe to Zero Trust Journey on LinkedIn for the latest news, events, and giveaways. Until next time.